What is going on, my broskiis? My name is Toadskii, back again here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video. Now today we're doing a video that I have not done in a little while. The last time I uploaded this video was at the beginning of November, and it has been quite a while. And the main reason for it is because a lot of people were asking for this video, and I wanted to do it, but the problem is that there just wasn't enough variation in Pirate Rumble for me to warrant to make another video, because the teams basically never changed, and the meta didn't really change either. However, with the introduction of very specific characters, which I'm sure all of you guys know at this point, yeah, Pirate Rumble's kind of been shaken up a little bit, and you know, since the last video, there's been a couple of Rumble exclusive Red Recruit characters, which definitely have made some teams better, so that's what we're going to be going through in this video today. Also, something to note is that this is my personal opinion, so this is not like an objective list, no, this is just my personal opinion of my experiences in Pirate Rumble, and what I found to be better or worse than each other. So, you know, don't take this as like the law. This is just what I have found on Pirate Rumble in terms of which teams I think are the best. So I guess without further ado, let's get into it. And of course, you know, this video in terms of when the next one's going to come out, I have no idea, because I mean, looking forward, there's probably not going to be too many changes in Pirate Rumble in terms of teams, probably for the next 4 months or so. At least that's what I think. But again, you know, if there are significant changes, I definitely want to make a video about that. So let's get into it. And the bottom team here, as you can see, is the Dex Team. Now, just because the Dex Team is considered the bottom of this list, I don't think it's actually like a bad team. The main problem that I see with the Dex Team currently is that it doesn't really have a lot of damage output. I mean, look, I may be missing a character here because I personally haven't used the Dex Team yet. I've only just gone up against it. But every time I go up against it, they always lack damage output. You know, you've got Kid, who's a very good defensive unit. He's basically like Legend Dofi, like the Int Dofi, but for Dex teams. He's actually really, really good. You've got Rayleigh, who he's got a good special, but it's fixed damage to a large range, I believe. I don't think it's all enemies, but I think it's a large range. He's got a great passive and everything, but he's not really good good offensively, right? You got Jinbei, who is a health cutter, but he's got a really high CT, and he's not the best, but he's okay. You've got Nami, who has decent effects. You've got Kung Fu Luffy, who can do some pretty good damage, but across the board, damage is not really here on this team. They need a really powerful unit to come in that does a huge chunk of damage. You know, a lot of the other teams have that, whereas this guy, with the Dex team specifically, they don't. Hawkins is a good defensive unit as well, and you got a healer in Corazon. So you can see they got units there, but they just need another powerhouse style unit that just comes in and just hits really hard, and they don't have that yet. So at the moment, I'm going to say Dex team is one of the lower tier ones. And then we're moving on to the next one, which is going to be the Shooter team. Now, the Shooter team it actually has a really good balance of offense and defense. But again, another really annoying thing about this team is, I mean, it's a little bit different from the Dex team, where they're really good defensively, whereas I think the Shooter teams, I think, are a little bit weaker on the defensive side. Offensively, they are quite fine. They're quite capable offensively. But, you know, kind of just relying on Frankie to be your core defensive unit doesn't help a lot when you have, I mean, look, the other slasher team that we're going to be talking about later, defensively, they're not great, but their offense is like so good, it outpaces other teams' defenses, and it just kills them before they're able to get defensive buffs active. And the shooters just don't do that. You know, they've got good defenses, and offensive they're okay, but like, it just across the board, they just got weaker effects compared to other teams. So that's just the way that I see it. I mean, replacements here, I mean, look, there haven't been many shooter characters that have released recently, unfortunately. Shooters really do need buffs, but Bandai doesn't like to give it to them. But I hope that they get buffs in the future, because they're just really, really bad at the moment. Let's move on to the next one, which is going to be the Free Spirit Crit team. Again, this is another team that you could potentially shake up in terms of the characters on the team. For replacements, I've got Odin and Roger in the back. Now, again, this is a team that I don't personally use, but just thinking in theory, if you've got a bunch of Free Spirit Crit characters, potentially you could like put Roger or Odin on that team as well, both of which are Free Spirit units. Could probably see some good usage there, especially with Odin, right? Because Odin does fixed damage, and then he does a multiply times his attack, and with Free Spirit teams, they try and raise their attack so high to, like, you know, 30 or 40, whatever, during a battle. And if you're able to get, you know, Odin with level like 30 or 40 attack, and then he does his special, that's quite devastating. And then you've also got Roger as well, who's got a great passive that can boost your whole team, and then he's also got obviously an amazing special too. So I think, you know, both of these characters could fit quite well, as long as your other core members of your Free Spirit Crit team are there. But overall, defensively, they are terrible. One of the worst defensive teams in the game. So for that reason, I think, you know, I'm going to leave them here. But offensively wise, they're quite capable. They're very, very good offensively. Moving on to 6, which is the Fighter team. I think the Fighter team is very good. Now, the team that you're seeing here, this is mainly like an offensive team, but defensive wise, like if you're going up against an enemy fighter team, they're going to have a little bit different of units that you'll see here. But, you know, characters like Raid Ivankov that have annoying debuffs and stuff like that, they're quite annoying to deal with. And I did use like one of the best teams in the game against, you know, that defensive fighter team, and it actually took me down to the last 30 seconds, which was quite surprising. So fighter teams defensively are very capable, and offensively they have access to some very good characters. Obviously, the new PvP Whitebeard was a new character that came out between this video and my last PvP tier list video, and he obviously makes a lot of teams a lot better. Then you've also got, you know, Katakuri, who's an awesome unit, and like actually debuffs some of the really annoying characters that you may see in the meta right now. So I think, you know, if you're trying to build an obscure team to beat the meta, I think V3 Katakuri has to be on your team somewhere, just because his passive debuffs a lot of the enemies, his special debuffs a lot of the enemies too. Really, really good. Carrot's a phenomenal character too. Really good passive, helping out your team as well as giving you some pretty good damage too. And Otama, I mean, if you're running an offensive style team, you probably don't want Otama here. Probably put Whitebeard on the team instead. But then again, having Otama on your team for the constant heals is pretty useful. So anyways, that's the fighter team there. I think it's a good team, actually. It's a really, really good team. Moving on to number 5 though, is basically a striker team, but also there's a lot of quick units as well. I've got Smoker on this team, but I personally haven't actually come up against a Smoker yet. But in theory, Smoker is supposed to be used on a quick team. The real problem with Smoker is that his special is really high CT. I think his special is like a 42 CT, which is quite ridiculous. I mean, for what he does, his special is good, but for being such a high cooldown, it's not overly worth it. But then you got the other characters here. You've got Whitebeard, who's awesome. You got Kuzan, who's awesome. However, I must say, Kuzan isn't as useful as what he once was, and the main reason for that is because we have two characters down here, Odin and Roger. Look, Odin and Roger, if you guys don't know, both have resistances against Action Bind and I think Special Bind. And then Roger, I think, has paralysis reduction. It's one of those two. Like, Roger, like, resists all 3, and then Odin resists 2 of them. But they both resist Action Bind. So, whenever you're going up against Kuzan and you've got your own Roger and Odin, when the Kuzan goes up and you know, tries to Action Bind your team, they can't hit Odin and Roger with that debuff. So, you know, even though some of your team members are probably going to be Action Binded, you know, your heavy hitters in Roger and Odin are not going to be touched, right? So it's quite good. So for that reason, you know, Kuzan isn't as good. I mean, he's still a good unit, but if he's not going to be good against Roger and Odin, as you may think it would, right? Carrot is still a really good unit, even though she's not a striker unit, but she's still a really good quick member for your team. And then Tizora, who's got a great passive, increasing CT and stuff like that. Really, really good unit. PvP Necro is fantastic, increasing defense and I think HP as well of Cerebral and Strikers. Really good unit. He's a health cutter too. New PvP Stussy came out. You know, if you're going to be running Stussy on your team, I would highly suggest running it on your main squad because her passive only works for the first 30 seconds. So in that first 30 seconds, you want to make sure she's active on your team, get everything going. So make sure if you do have her and you want to use her, put her on your main team. And then Bellamy as well, who has health cuts, which is quite good. So I think the quick striker team just has a really good balance of offense and defense, and they're really annoying to take down as well. Look, this might not be the exact team that you're going to go up against, but a lot of the good strikers in this game are quick units, so that's why I kind of labeled it as the quick and striker team. And look, if some of these characters would be replaced, sometimes you'll see Shank's crew on the team, even though not a quick or a striker unit, at least not quick considered in PvP, but you know, Shank's crew just with his amazing defensive passive plus health cuts, of course. Look, there's going to be lots of changes on this team, but definitely quick and striker, look out for it. It's quite a dangerous team to go up against. Moving on to number 4, I have the mono side team. Now, I don't have a lot of replacements here, but there are, you know, a decent chunk of replacements here. But these are like the characters that I expect to see when I go up against a side team. But look, again, Shank's crew is another phenomenal unit that you'll probably see on this team too. But V3 Law, the combination of V3 Law, Roger, and Kizaru is devastating. All of which are Psy and Slasher characters. They all buff each other. It is insane how good it is. And then you've also got Kizaru who buffs shooters, which V2 Kuzan and V3 Boa are. V3 Boa is also buffing your Psy units. You've got Kuzan buffing your Psy units. Roger buffs all. And then you got Law that buffs your Psy units as well. All of these characters are buffing each other. They do crazy shenanigans. This team is really good because it's basically like, it's like a pseudo slasher team because you have this core of Law, Roger, and Kizaru. Like, the core of these 3 units is insanely powerful, and then you're just adding some side characters on top of that. Like, this is like a team that you would probably build if you don't own Kozuki Odin yourself. Like, this team could probably get the job done. Boa could probably be replaced with some other characters that you have in your account. But just across the board, this is a really dangerous team to come up against because they get their specials very, very quickly, and they hit very, very hard, so you've got to be careful about that. Also, you've got the effect of Law and also V2 Kuzan, who both debuff like enemy int and driven character. I think it's driven. I can't remember which characters law debuffs. Law debuffs some characters, but I know that Cruzan debuffs int. So basically, like, this team counters the int team, the int driven team quite well, but I think the int team is still a better team compared to the Psi team. But either way, that's what I think about that. This team is still very, very powerful. Moving on to the top 3 though. The third place team is going to be the OG slasher team. So this is not including, you know, the new characters that came out, because not everyone would have got their hands on them. So this is like, if you don't have those OG slashers, then yeah, you'd probably want to be running a team like this. And look, in replacements, yeah, you could technically just put Roger and Odin as well, but that kind of just defeats the purpose of the other team that you guys are going to be seeing a little bit later on. But this team is still good. Like, despite it, you know, being essentially like the first team to come out in Pirate Rumble that was dominating, it's still really, really good because of this guy mainly. This Doflamingo is just bonkers crazy. And then you've got the addition of Kizaru to help your team get their specials quicker. You've also got Shank's crew, who enables you to get defenses. Carrot, who's great offensively. Inu, who's great offensively, but Inu is not a great choice if the enemy has a lot of defenses, because obviously defense buffs are going to block multiplier attack specials, so you do not want to run Inu in that case. You'd probably want to be running Mihawk for health cuts, or you could run Law for fixed damage, or you could run the Cracker for increasing your character's CT, but ideally you'd want to be running Mihawk for the health cuts in that type of situation. But still, across the board, really, really, really good team. And now we're moving on to team number 2. And in my opinion, the second best team in Pirate Rumble on Global right now is going to be the int or driven team. I say int or driven because they're all int, of course, but there are a majority of these characters being driven. This team is great. I mean, look, even though Roger and Odin are kind of like destroying the meta right now, this team is still very good. It's still very, very powerful, and it still gets the job done. Of course, if you're going up against a rival Roger and Odin, you probably want to be very careful about that. But if you're not going up against them, this team is probably still the best team in the game outside of Roger and Odin, right? So you've got everything going on here. You've got the amazing defensive effects of this guy. You've got the amazing passive of NL. Katakuri's a beast with his debuffing passive and debuffing special and fixed damage to all enemies as well. You've got fixed damage here with Jozu and his amazing passive. You've got Blackbeard for amazing damage, and he's got a health boost. You've got Fuji for health cuts. You've got, I mean, remember, these are replacements anyway, but if you don't have one of these characters, you can replace them with one of these. You've got Fuji for health cuts. You've got amazing buffers from Shanks, and you got CT reducing from Pudding. And I mean, this team is great. Like, even though Roger and Odin are still so good, I mean, you can't discredit the int team. It's still great. But then, of course, I mean, it's no surprise to anyone at this point, but the best team in the game is this, like, hands down. The modern slashers, this is the best team in the game. Like, hands down, there is nothing that competes with this except for a mirror match. That's the only way that I see this team losing a match effectively. Now, yes, you can get, you know, really unlucky in some of these. Like, if you're using, you know, the modern slashes and you're going to be int driven, you can still lose. I mean, it's all RNG at the end of the day. You could get kind of destroyed by, you know, specials not proccing at the right time and stuff like that. But just across the board, this is the best team. The combination of Roger and Odin is I don't understand why they develop the characters to be as good as what they are. So for those who need a little bit of a refresher here, in Pirate Rumble, Odin, he just does a lot of damage, right? But the really cool thing here, what you can do is you can use Roger's special first. Now, Roger actually has a 30 CT, whereas Odin has a 32 CT. And by utilizing Law and Kizaru, it enables your Psi characters or your Psi slasher characters to get their specials a lot quicker. And then also you've got Odin's passive, who increases your special CT as well for your slashers. So essentially all of your team is going to be getting their specials much quicker, and specifically your Psi slasher characters are getting their specials insanely fast. Like, I'm talking 15 levels of CT increase. I'm not even kidding. And by that standard, you should be getting your Roger special first. Now, Roger, he targets all enemies for 2,000 fixed damage, I think, once it's fully maxed out. But then he does like a large range debuff of attack, defensive speed reduction. Now, the really cool thing about that is that if you're reducing all those enemies' CTs, all those enemies' defenses, then you let Odin attack, because he obviously is not a Psi character. He doesn't get his CT as fast. But he does, he targets all enemies for fixed damage, of course, so more fixed damage. And then he does a like wide horizontal range of like a huge multiplier of his attack. So if you've used Roger prior to, not only have you done a lot of damage already, but you're debuffing their defenses. And then by Odin attacking, all of your characters have really high attack, by the way. I think you're up to like 20 plus attack at this point. Like between 15 to 25 attack at this point. And then if you have a multiplier times his attack, you just do so much damage. And like just with this core of like Roger and Odin, it's quite insane. And then you have Doflamingo to help you get a little bit of defense, because that's the main problem with this team, is that defensively wise, it is horrible. You're only relying on Doflamingo for your defenses. You've got Law as well, who does also really good fixed damage. So you got fixed damage, lots of good attack damage. He does lots of good attack damage. He does fixed damage. He does decent attack damage. And look, especially after you used Roger to debuff the enemy defense, when Kizaru attacks, you know, Kizaru typically doesn't do that much damage, but once you've debuffed their defenses with Roger, he actually hits really hard. Like, I'm talking like sometimes I've used his special and he targets like 3 or 4 enemies for like 3,000 or 4,000 damage. It's actually kind of crazy how good this team is, man. And with Kizaru, the way that he's built, he gets his special up like, I'm talking like 4 or 5 times a run. It's pretty bizarre. And then in terms of replacements, like I think this 5 is the best core 5 in the game. If you don't have one of these 5, then yeah, you could replace it with Shank's Crew or Carrot, or if you want to get more CT up, you could use Cracker as well. I do think Carrot or Shank's Crew are the 2 best units you could put in this team to like just shuffle some units around. But across the board, I don't think anyone is surprised at the fact that the modern slashers are the best team in the game. And I don't think that's going to be changing for, I mean, on global, unless if they release like a new global first batch or a simultaneous release batch or something. I don't see this slasher team moving from the #1 spot for the next 4 months. Like 4 or 5 months, this team's probably going to be #1. And it is what it is, man. There's nothing we could do about it. This team's way too good. I mean, look, unless if someone theory crafts some sort of like really cheese way to defeat it, guaranteed, this is definitely going to be the #1 team for the next like 3 or 4, 5 months or so. So, I mean, look forward to it, guys. But anyways, with that being said, that is going to wrap up this video today. I sincerely hope you guys enjoyed this one. And if you guys did enjoy it, make sure you go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date with all the content that I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. But on that, I'll see you guys within the next video.